All right, thanks for joining us tonight. This is going to be a presentation on information about applying for internal nomination for one or many or a few of the UK fellowships. Those essentially that we're going to talk about tonight are the Rhodes Scholarship, the Marshall Scholarship, and the Gates Cambridge. Sorry, just kidding. We will talk about the Gates Cambridge, but we're also talk about the Mitchell Scholarship. So there's a lot of ways that you can study in the UK, but we're really going to focus on those that require institutional nomination. So first, hello, my name is Lauren Tuckley. I'm the director of the Center for Research and Fellowships, and I'm excited that you came tonight and want to learn more about this.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Campo. I'm a fellowship coordinator here with the Center for Research and Fellowships, and I'm excited to see a bunch of faces in the audience. A lot of you guys we saw this morning at the breakfast. That's great. Some new faces, some old faces. That's great. And hopefully this is going to be a helpful presentation for you all. Thank you for coming tonight. So the Center for Research and Fellowships, we offer a lot of opportunities. So if we advance to the next slide, we see just a couple of, examples of those. We advise on all of these scholarships, right? But the focus tonight is going to be looking at those UK scholarships, right, that require institutional endorsement, okay? So Gates Cambridge is also a really great opportunity, but it doesn't require endorsement. And while we'll support you in your application process, it doesn't necessitate the kind of elaborate process that the Rhodes and Marshall nominees have to go through.
Yeah, just a quick point on that. So for those of you that don't know what nomination is, that essentially means there are opportunities to pursue research or an academic degree program or to do this thing called a fellowship. And for those that are interested in applying to a few of them that require what's called institutional nomination, you must first be nominated by your institution or your university, right? So our job is to run an internal review, evaluation, recruitment, and selection process to identify those that are really good fit for the program, and then to put those forward with our support. And so that's why when we say like nomination or endorsement, you're finding out information tonight about what would be required in order to have sort of Georgetown back your application. And those opportunities you can't apply. So the Rhodes and the Marshall and the Mitchell, if you're a senior or a rising senior, being fellowships that require that institutional process. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about.
Great.
Pathway.
So this slide is basically just to emphasize, hey, a lot of you guys are coming from different perspectives. You may have had different experiences in undergrad. And while there are definitely attributes that we see in a lot of fellowship candidates, and there are experiences that we see in a lot of successful competitive applicants, there is really a broad range of what you can do, the kind of person you can be, and still be competitive. So, as we kind of talk about these individual fellowships, we'll talk a little bit about, maybe the different foci of each, but I would encourage all of you to consider applying to as many of these opportunities as possible, because that's the way to be most successful at this process. So I'll talk a little bit first about the Marshall Scholarship. The Marshall Scholarship is a 2-year award to study at any of 50 plus higher education in the UK. And the Marshall partners with a ton of universities whose programs can be accessed through the Marshall Course Finder, which we'll plug a little bit later in the presentation. And there is really a whole range of degrees that you can do through the Marshall. And there are a couple of restrictions on that. You'll see that here. But by and large, almost anything you want to do in the UK, it can be supported by the Marshall. Now, a crucial thing that I want to emphasize that I think goes unmentioned in a lot of these presentations is that if you're applying for the Marshall, you can apply for 1 year at one university and then a second year at a second university. By far, the most frequent question in advising on the Marshall I get is, can I do 1 year at one university and another year at another university? I would say that's almost the norm for the Marshall. And that's one of the reasons it's really exciting. You get to see a lot of the United Kingdom that you might not otherwise see. Now, moving on, there is the Mitchell Scholarship.
Yeah, we're not going to spend too much time on the Mitchell. If you're a rising senior and would be interested in going to Ireland for an academic degree, a 1-year program, then we can talk more about that. But really, we at the center focus primarily on the Rhodes and the Marshall in the nomination process, although if a degree program in one of the participating institutions with the Mitchell appeals to you, we can talk about what that looks like. But I want to spend a little bit more time on the Rhodes and the Marshall, because that's our core area of expertise and our core area of focus. And also, like Jonathan said, if you identify several fellowships that support, various iterations of your interest in pursuing academic study in the UK, then you should apply for as many as you think would fit your postgraduate degree program interests. So there's not going to be any sort of selection preference or bias for those that want to apply to multiple. And in fact, casting a wide net's probably in your favor. So that said, if the Mitchell is funding your next step in pursuing graduate study in really any degree granting graduate program in the UK, the Marshall, then the Rhodes funds that next step only at Oxford. So those that are interested in programs at Oxford University could also pitch those same programs to the Marshall, although we have had students that apply for both the Rhodes and the Marshall and end up pitching two very different potential universities in which to pursue their graduate study. Again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds around degree selection and strategy for that. We do have other resources to help walk you through program selection. So the long story short is the Rhodes is going to fund 2 years at Oxford University. There's a lot of ways that you can have a really excellent educational experience through the Rhodes Scholarship. We want to plug a few things that we're not here to talk about that potentially aren't in the packaged UK fellowship process. These are really important because we want to highlight, again, many of you who are interested in the Rhodes or the Marshall or the Mitchell end up being competitive for a number of other fellowships that might fund similar opportunities, those being the Gates Cambridge, the Fulbright, and the St. Andrews here.
Who has any Scottish heritage here? Do you know? Anybody who has at least a great grandparent who is Scottish.
Oh,
okay.
That's exciting.
That's great. If you have at least that much Scottish heritage, then you're eligible for the St. Andrews Society scholarship, which will send you to Scotland for a year of study at any Scottish university. It's a really great opportunity. I think it's tremendously underapplied. Give it some thought if you're a rising senior.
So the Gates, why are we like Gates Cambridge? Okay, funding, postgraduate education at Cambridge. That sounds like exactly like what, the Rhodes and the Marshall endeavored to do. Well, the difference is with the Gates, you can apply straight away without having institutional endorsement. So anyone that goes through the development program, anyone that gets nomination for one of these should also consider their options of doing educational postgraduate work at Cambridge through the funded Gates Cambridge Fellowship. We just don't include them in this kind of package because anybody can apply. Although we would sort of suggest that those that go through the nomination process are nominated, work through our office to help put forward the strongest application possible, would get a benefit that would help them apply for the Gates Cambridge as well. So again, study in the UK, make sure this is on your radar. Another opportunity that I want you all to consider very seriously is the Fulbright US Student Program. This one will fund either study, so a one-year master's program, or the first year of a master's program at any institution or in any country that participates in the State Department's defined countries where they have these relationships. It's basically an exchange program that's run through the State Department to facilitate cross-cultural exchange through educational pursuits. So you can do a master's program, you can teach English as a second language, or you can do a one-year research project. There's also a pathway for students that might apply for nomination for one of the competitive UK fellowships, also apply for a Fulbright. Potentially the UK fellowships doesn't really work out. Maybe they don't get an interview, they're not selected, but the Fulbright works out. You can continue to build and enhance your competitiveness for the Rhodes or the Marshall by doing like a Fulbright, for example, to extend your intellectual interests, go into the field, do research, get a cross-cultural experience, reapply with nomination, and then find success in the second attempt at applying for either the Rhodes or the Marshall. We have about, anecdotally in our work at Georgetown, about 50% of those that apply for one of the competitive fellowships, the Rhodes, Marshall, Mitchell, et cetera, we have about 50% are reapplicants where they took another year to develop their interests, develop their research and their experiences, and then they reapplied and found success, and about 50% for those that receive the award in their first attempt. So always something to think about, casting a wide net, taking a short game approach to this, and also consider the long game.
So now here's what you guys should be doing at this moment, okay? So we're kind of getting near to crunch time here when it comes to this internal application process, right? So if you have not begun the research and reflection process, you should absolutely get on that now and do some more research and more reflection, okay? And what does that entail? It entails asking yourself first, okay, I'm thinking I might want to go to the UK. Why do I want to do UK? Are those reasons compelling to people other than me, okay? Could I narrate convincingly why I ought to be sent to the UK, funded to go there, okay? I'm going to research degree programs. I'm going to find those programs that build upon what I have done as an undergraduate or offer a new direction for me after I complete my undergraduate studies, or provide auxiliary knowledge that will make me a more effective actor in the space that I want to act in. And that process of finding a degree program, of finding a justification to go to the UK, is something that we will extend into the summer after the internal nomination process. But in order to put a good application in on May 30th, it's something that you'll have to have begun by yourself, you know? And our advising appointments are open. We're happy to talk to you guys about your interests, about your prospects, about speculative visions that you can lay out of your future. But it's important to really take some time between now and May 30th and think about, you know, what it is that's motivating you to go to the UK. How are you going to tell that story to us and then ultimately to the selection committees who will be making the final call about these scholarships? And that's really the heart of the whole process. So we'll talk a little bit later about what we call our candidate development process. And you know, while we at the center are definitely committed to getting the win on as many of these fellowships as possible, and in fact, we've been tremendously successful at that. You know, we are the top producer of Fulbrights in the United States this year. You know, this year we had 2 Rhodes. You know, several years ago, we had 5 offers for Marshall scholarships. You know, we're really dedicated and successful in the number game of getting the win. But I know I speak for both of us and speak, in fact, for everyone at the center when I say that the center of this process is not getting the fellowship win. It's you. It's working out what kind of person you're going to be. You know what I mean? What's going to matter to you? How are you going to direct your life? You know, it almost is an exercise, the candidate development process and the internal nomination process, in developing your own agency in your life, you know, making you more agentic, you know, and that's maybe a heady thing to say, but I think as you go through the process, you'll see that, you know, and time again, what we hear from people who have gone through the process, even people who have gone through the process unsuccessfully, is that it was worth it by itself, you know, and turning the wheels of reflection and planning right now is going to ensure that you get the most out of this process, win or lose.
Yeah, because you probably won't win. So we do this for a really important purpose. And again, that's you, like figuring out what you want to do and how to like make the most of the impact. You know, we really interrogate some of those interests that you have through the vehicle of the application, that ultimately when you get to the other end of it, whether or not you're successful, you have a clear like plan. You've identified new things that are like, or characterize those in ways that you hadn't before, that show like what your next 3 to 5 years might look like and how to orient you know, the first few years post grad.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important thing and anybody should do it. All right.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, though, the fellowships, what are they giving you? They're giving you a graduate degree program. So they're looking for individuals that have a clearly defined sense of an area that, or a problem, an issue that they would just want to continue to build skills, you know, networks, opportunities, find ways to continue to, you know, build up, for lack of a better word, like tools in your toolbox in order to make some sort of, you know, meaningful difference with basically the only life you have to live, right? You got to make some really critical decisions in the next few years about how you're going to invest your time and your energy. And like, we want you to do that with purpose. And the scholarships want you to define that purpose, really clearly develop a vision for the life you want to lead and the change you want to make. And then basically they want you to demonstrate how study in the UK can enhance and accelerate that opportunity.
Yeah.
Because let's be clear, can get a number of excellent educational experiences in the postgraduate space by not doing the Rhodes and the Marshall. But what the Rhodes, the Marshall, the Mitchell, and many of these other fellowships offer you is a network of individuals that are similarly, interested, committed, and driven to make a difference with what they want to do and how they want to engage professionally. And so you are kind of asking on one hand, these fellowship, grantors to say, hey, like fund me to study in the UK, give me the opportunity to connect with other like-minded individuals, because collectively we can all move forward in our own respective areas and make a difference.
Yeah.
So the critical way to communicate that investment in you is by having a really clear sense and an argument for why you must go to the UK to do this degree program, because this degree, this experience, this skill set, this expertise, this experience, whatever, allows you then to, move forward with the vision you're presenting. So we have the vision element, and then we have the programmatic necessity.
Yeah.
And so to do that, you've got to be pretty clear on what programs you're pitching and why you're pitching them. So that's why we want you to think a lot about degree program research selection. And again, one last point on that. Internal nomination is about finding those that can see the value of this, that have an issue that they want to really address, that they have demonstrated in other areas of their engagement, both curricularly and extracurricularly, some of these qualities that show that they're going to when they're given the ball, they're going to take it to the hoop.
Yeah.
Okay. So all that to say, at internal nomination, we're looking for those that have that material, right, that we can help you shape. So you need to get a really good idea of what you're pitching and the degree programs that are a potentially really good option for you at the moment of internal nomination, but you are not locked into that vision specifically or into that degree program if you receive nomination. We work with you, and in fact, I don't know, 50%, again, probably end up changing a little bit how they're thinking about their vision and also their degree program selections.
Yeah. This is just really crucial. I don't want to beat this horse to death, but something that the Marshall has been stressing so much this year in their communications, right, is that they are looking for people who have a clear degree program choice. And then also they're saying this degree program knowledge. They just want you to know what it is you're signing up for. That's so important, and it's so neglected. Now, you'll be going up against the best and the brightest in the United States. You'll be going up against people who have done 2 tours of duty, you know what I mean, who've discovered new drugs, who've started companies, okay?
Okay, well.
And there's nothing that you can do now necessarily to close those gaps, You can't go and, save a country from the brink of civil war or something in 3 months. What you can do in 3 months is learn a lot about those programs that you want to go for, okay? Become a wonk on those programs that you're looking at. Become a program savant. Know as much as is possible about these programs, because what that will permit you to do is make the sort of justification that grad schools want to see, that these scholarships want to see, that they too rarely do. And that's a justification on the level of, I want to work with this person whose work on this is really exciting to me and intersects with this in my own work. I want to work with this person. I want to be part of this working group. I want to be part of this center. All of that stuff is going to comprise your academic program statement, and too often this is left too late. So one way to start researching that, which I think we hit on the next page, is this Marshall course search, okay? So while the Rhodes doesn't have a tool like this, you can go to this website, marshallscholarship.org/study-in-the-UK/course search, and look at all of the eligible Marshall programs. Now, there are a couple of misprisions in this search. So sometimes it will fling up a result that actually isn't approved by Marshall. A couple of dual degree programs make their way in, even though those aren't eligible for Marshall funding. But by and large, these are the programs that the Marshall will fund. And what I encourage you to do is take, an interest of yours, okay? Take the thing that you want to study, plug that in as a keyword, plug in synonyms as a keyword, okay? Find all the programs in the UK that are doing this, okay? Look up a preeminent journal in your subject that's based in the UK and find those people who are from different universities and see where they're based, what the programs at that university are like. And a final point on this, and we'll move on, okay? 80% of Marshall applicants applied to what gets called the Oxbridge London bubble, okay? So London has a bunch of good schools, UCL, Imperial College, King's College, okay? All of the schools of the University of London, okay? And Oxford and Cambridge are obviously preeminent schools in the United Kingdom. 80% of Marshall applicants go within that bubble though. So if you can find any justification to get outside of it, to go to the rest of the island, the Marshall conceives themselves as an island-wide scholarship, yet they're sending 80% of Marshall scholars to that bubble. If you can find any reason to get across the rest of the island, the Marshall will be pleased with that. It's a small point in your favor, but it's a point in your favor nonetheless. That's basically free. So that's another thing that I would encourage you to do. A lot of you guys are probably looking at LSE, you're probably looking at Oxford and Cambridge, you know, but get outside of that bubble and look across the entire country, because there are so many great opportunities across the entire United Kingdom that you all should take advantage of.
Right. I mean, the Marshalls run out of the Foreign Office in the UK with the idea of providing a diverse cultural experience for Americans who come abroad to study. So they've got great statistics on who applies, where they go, and they're always talking about how it can be to your advantage to pitch a school that, you know, potentially is lesser pitched, especially if this is like a school that does the thing that you want to do, and you pick Oxford just for the sake of like, oh, it's the, you know, name brand, but really for your subject area, the experts are at St. Andrews or they're at Cardiff, right? Like that's going to knock your consideration if you haven't done your homework and know, like the appeal is that you need the skill set, the expertise, the intellectual development, and that's not always a default to those, you know, the golden triangle.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the internal nomination process, which is the next step for you all. The first thing that I will say for the internal nomination process is you should be reaching out to your recommenders now if you haven't already, okay? So this is kind of the last stop on the train info session, right? Because if you don't make your decision, say, this week, then you're going to have a hard time soliciting all your letters of recommendation, okay? Because we're asking for 8, if you're going for the Rhodes, 8 substantive letters of recommendation, which usually works out to being around 1,000 words. And why do we say that? That's to give your recommenders a guide, okay? Because some recommenders, you know, maybe they're from the hard scientists or the hard sciences, or they're from the math department, and they're going to give you 2 lines that's like, terrific student, you know, highly recommended, okay? That to them might be an extremely positive letter of recommendation. But when these things are being read, length is a crude proxy for advocacy, okay? When they read a letter, they immediately make a judgment based on the length. And also, what length buys you time for is time for stories. And stories are the most rhetorically effective thing that you can put into a letter of recommendation. You know, hopefully, if these recommenders know you, if they're dedicated to your cause, then they'll be able to produce a letter of that length.
I want to like step back just for a second. I do not want you emailing your professors and being like, I need a letter of recommendation with 1,000 words and a lot of stories, although, you know, this is what we need.
Yeah.
But here's what you can do. You can provide them with information that tells them why you've selected them, provides them with a few like remembrances of. So when you ask for a letter, there's a few things that you should just generally do. Here's some like top tips for being like, you know, I guess on point when asking for letters of recommendation. So you ask for a letter of recommendation. The next thing when they say yes is to follow up and say, you know, thank you, that's awesome. So here's some information about when it's due, where it should go. And then also, you know, I was thinking about, it may be helpful for me to provide you with a reason why I asked for you to write this letter. I remember freshman year when I first entered your pro seminar, and you gave you know, the first lecture you gave us was on the thing, and then you wrote a paper and that informed your major, and then you went to, so you like reminding them and saying how thankful you are for the letter of recommendation, but then like, it's almost like planting the information in the email that gives them a sense of what they should be talking about, and you doing the connection. And it's because this reason that I'm asking you for this letter, like you providing them that information like as context will end up in the letter without you having to say, this is what I need you to tell me about, which is not the way to do it, right? I think it can also be helpful if you tell them, you know, who else is serving as your recommender. If you're having 12 people recommend you, I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's helpful to have a sense of like what their role is in relation to your application. So I've asked you, you know, to provide what you might consider as more or less a character reference, because whatever, my primary recommender in my academic area is this person. So I'm saying, no matter what, when you're asking for letters of recommendation, you want to do a follow-up that provides the recommender with the source material that helps them, you know, attune what they're going to say about you for the audience and the purpose for which you're asking for this letter. If you have questions about how to do that, or you would like us to give you a letter that comes from the office that tells your recommender, like what, the Rhodes, Marshall, Mitchell competitive UK fellowships are, we can provide you with that so that they can have the context. Now, when you're talking with your recommenders, you're really asking for nomination for potentially the Rhodes and the Marshall. You don't need to necessarily go through the entire process of the 14 different degree programs that you've been thinking about. If they don't have a specifically, attenuated letter that speaks to, what specific degree programs the Marshall and your backups are, that won't impact your nomination, application selection, chances or whatnot, right? We just want to hear more from them about how they know you, like why you want to go do graduate study. And they don't need to have this like tailored for the Rhodes or tailored for the Marshall at this stage. If you receive nomination, we're going to work with them behind the scenes as well to update those letters. Your candidacy, your vision, what you want to do, and your degree programs sometimes change. So we can work after nomination institutionally to support you to make sure that those letters reflect that. You don't need to have all of that in the letter for nomination that's due on May 30th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other components of it, the application, the cover sheet, the 6-minute video, there are directions for that on our webpage. If you look up CRF Georgetown, Rhodes, and Marshall, there'll be a description of what the video requires. There's also a recording of an info session where that's described in greater detail, but basically it's just your pitch in 6 minutes, over 20 slides. It's voiceover, okay? It's not Elle Woods, all right? Just voiceover over a PowerPoint, okay? And then your resume and transcript. What I'll say to all of these is that all of them are important, but all of them are also can be changed. Okay. So after you go through the internal nomination process, this all might change again. You are locked into nothing by submitting a internal application. Okay. So what is the timeline, right? So now until late May, which means from early May to late May, okay, we are in advising. You should fill out our advising intake form if you haven't already and come in for an appointment. And we are starting the candidate development process, okay? And then on May 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern time, all materials are due to fellowships@georgetown.edu. Now, some people ask, where should my recommenders send their letters? Should they send them to me and then I send them to fellowships@georgetown.edu? No, all the letters should be sent straight to Georgetown, fellowships@georgetown.edu, as should your application. Ideally, you should compile all of your application into a single PDF. That makes it much easier for us, okay? And then this application goes away to our external committee, which is made up of former winners of these scholarships from Georgetown. They come back to us in late June with their recommendations. And on that basis, we select a cohort of nominees, okay? And this is when we begin our intense candidate development process, okay? Our intensive candidate development process, which runs from then until the early fall when these interviews are, okay? And a little bit on that process, okay? Candidate development, what is it, okay? This really is the centerpiece for our Rhodes and Marshall process. It's why this is so involved. It's why we have a bunch of info sessions on this, okay? Because this process is, an enormous amount of labor from our center towards building candidates that are both going to be able to stand on their own 2 feet regardless of what happens, and also are super competitive for these scholarships, okay? So the candidate development process, as conceived by us, is an intensive, you-focused, cohort-based writing, interviewing, and discernment process, okay? So I'm gonna unpack what each of those means. Intensive means you're not just submitting an application to us when you submit an internal endorsement application, okay? You're really signing up for, in the event of your selection, around 3, 4, 5 hours a week of prep, okay? And what does that prep look like? It looks like it's cohort based. You'll be working with the other people in your nomination cohort, people who have deep interests and extraordinary expertise in their own fields, and who can offer you so much in terms of peer support, in terms of just knowledge that you wouldn't have had otherwise, and also feedback on all the components of your application, which includes your pitch. And that's the discernment portion of the candidate development process. It's the part that comes first. And it's the part that, for me, is most central, okay? We'll ask you to write what gets called an autobiographical form, okay? Where you will answer some questions about, things that have formed you into the person that you are today. And hopefully what that kickstarts is this process whereby, you can really, figure things out for yourself, figure things out about yourself, and it's on that firm substructure that a competitive fellowship application is built, and The structure above that substructure is the writing development, is the interviewing development, okay? You will be going through rounds of mock interviews with your peers, with alumni, with professors, with Lauren and I, to help you present your case in a compelling, off-the-cuff, convincing, extemporaneous way. Your writing will go through rounds and rounds of development until it is sharpened to an extremely fine point. And then the last thing I'll say about candidate development is that it's you focused, right? This is what I was saying earlier, that our entire process, it's around building you up, okay? And if we build you up, okay, into the kinds of people who go and do the things that Rhodes and Marshall scholars are supposed to do, then that's something that's going to become visible to Rhodes and it's going to become visible to Marshall. And more often than not, you're selected because it's clear that you are the sort of person that they want to associate themselves with. But the benefit of this approach is in the event of your non-selection, which it's possible that nobody here today wins a Marshall or a Rhodes. You know, in fact, it's probably probable. In the event of your non-selection, you are still the sort of person who is mission driven, who has an issue area, who has a clear vision for how they can make an intervention in that issue area, who has super sharp, you know, sense of both who they are, what they want to do, how to interview, how to convey that to other people, both in writing and in speech. And whatever you're going to go do next, you're going to go and do it more effectively because you went through this process. At least that is our sincere hope and how we structured the entire process. So that's basically it. All right. You guys have, you know, now 27 days to put together your application. We're really looking forward to seeing them. And we encourage you all to submit an application and definitely get on it as soon as possible. Thank you so much for coming today.